Deputy Boyd Barrett, you're moving it, are you? Good stuff. Over to you then, sir.
Yeah.
You have
Thanks.
15 minutes.
Thank you, Count Corla. And Deputy Cowan sends his apologies, but was unavoidably detained. But also made the point that he's just recently been installed as chair and it wasn't around for the putting together of this report, so felt it was... Well, there's a few of them, hopefully. There's a few of them.
You've been raising it often enough anyway.
Yeah. And I'd like to thank all of the committee members who participated in the production of this report and all of the contributors who work in the industry or involved in the film industry. And I would also like to thank the former chair of the Budget Scrutiny Committee, Nessa Horrigan, who was the chairperson during the production of this report and inputted significantly into the report and was very open to the suggestion that we should do a report on Section 481 on the film industry. And I really appreciate that. I did ask our committee to do this report, but all of the committee were very, very receptive to the idea that we would examine the Section 481 relief. And I'm very pleased with the report that has been produced. I think I have to formally move the motion, do I? Yeah, I think there's a formally move the motion as well in relation to the report. Okay, what does this report do? It acknowledges the importance of public funding for the Irish film industry and the audiovisual sector. And there is a clear commitment, and I think a consensus across all parties, that we need to continue to publicly support the film industry, the audiovisual sector. And some of the recommendations coming out of the report are specific in making proposals about increasing the amount of public investment into the film industry via Section 481 and extending the regional uplift in terms of Section 481 to stimulate the film industry. But it also puts a whole number of very important conditions on that funding. And I'll go through them in a little bit more detail, but in broad outline, what it says and what it reinforces is what is in the law, in the Finance Act, in relation to Section 481, and what is a requirement under EU rules, state aid rules, for the audiovisual sector. So there are legal conditions attached to Section 481. And just so people know the monies involved, we are talking in the region of 100 million, sometimes 120 million, sometimes 80 million, but it's in that territory, and it may rise each year. So it's a lot of money going to the Irish film industry. And the obligations on the recipients of Section 481 are that they must meet what are called the Industry Development Test and the Culture Test. That is to say, the money must contribute towards the development of a sustainable industry that critically ensures quality employment and training. If you look into the directive, it goes further to talk about creating permanent pools of skill in the industry. So that is a condition of getting this very, very large amount of money which is given to the film industry every year. And I haven't done the calculation of exactly how much has been given over the various years of Section 481 and its predecessor, because there was a predecessor, but some estimates put it, if you look at total funding via Section 481 and its predecessor, in the billions. In the billions. And by the way, it's important to stress that this report deals with Section 481, but there's also currently €40 million come from RTE in addition to this funding, and about 20 million coming from Screen Ireland. and I'm not sure, but I think there may be some money coming from the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland as well. So we are talking about, given that it's been the topic of the week, we are talking about an amount of public funds going into the film industry that's on a par with what goes into RTE. And we think about the controversy in RTE. And I think what's happened in RTE adds to the seriousness of the recommendations of this report. Because if you had discussed, the question of public funding to RTE a few months ago, and the need for scrutiny and whether the conditions were being met, people mightn't have listened to you very much. But after what's happened in the last few weeks, everybody is saying, we need scrutiny, we need governance, we need to know we're getting value for money to protect public sector, public service broadcasting, and there's a frenzy, and a legitimate one, saying we need a forensic oversight to ensure that public money is being spent the way it should, and that a key part of that narrative is that while some were doing very well at the top, courtesy of public money, the workers, the artists, the performers, the journalists, the staff, the crew weren't doing so well at all. Now, this is the audiovisual sector. There's a direct overlap between RTE and the Irish film industry. And many of the same issues that have emerged out of the RTE controversy or scandal are also alleged to be taking place in the Irish film industry. And that the industry development test and the culture test are not being met, and they are systematically being resisted by those that get the money. That they are systematically ensuring that the quality and employment and training that is supposed to be a condition of the investment is not happening and can't happen the way the industry is currently operating, and that there is in fact no way of even quantifying whether it's meeting the culture test. Something a government report back in 2017 acknowledged. It's very difficult to assess the culture test. How is it contributing to culture? It's a bit easier to assess how it should be contributing to quality employment and training and the industry development test. And the allegation from some representatives of film crew and from the representatives of the actors and the performers, particularly in equity, but I've also heard it from writers and directors, is that the industry development test in terms of quality employment and training is not being met and is being systematically resisted by the recipients of Section 481. And if I might just briefly sort of enhance the analogy with RTE, one of the groups you may have noticed have put out a press release today, the Minister may have seen it, in relation to this report, is Screen Producers Ireland. They've also been furiously putting out press releases all week on foot of the RTE debacle, essentially saying that what's happening in RTE shouldn't impact on the money that their members receive via Section 481. They also, as I understand it, also receive money from RTE. In fact, the Minister can check this, and I think we need to start to check this sort of stuff in the aftermath of the RTE scandal, is I think virtually all of their funding comes from public money. But they are representatives of the producers in the industry, and a relatively small number of producers who control the industry, who get the majority of public funding. Now that's interesting. Now we're all saying we need forensic accounting of the money that is spent in RTE. I put it, and this is essentially the thrust of this report, is to say we need forensic accounting and oversight of the public investment in film. Our report has gone as far as to write to the European Commission asking the Commission to investigate whether the current situation in the Irish film industry is in breach of the fixed term workers legislation in terms of systematic abuse of fixed term workers contracts and systematic failure to comply with the European Copyright Directive in terms of the royalties that accrue to the performers, actors and writers because of the use of what are called buyout contracts. Because if you want to work in the Irish film industry, unless you're pretty much a superstar, you're told, sign a buyout contract that in effect means that all of the onward royalties accruing for that film production go to the producer company and not to the performer and writer. And they have to sell those for a set amount regardless of how much money that film might make. So let's say a film is being made, courtesy of Section 481 at the moment, and it goes global. Becomes a huge global success. The people who worked on that, regardless of that success, for 10 years won't see any of the benefit of that success. They'll get a one-off payment and the rights are bought out for the next 10 years. And if I understand what Equity are saying in their report, effectively that will happen then for another 10 years. And of course all the main royalties will accrue, the profits will accrue afterwards, but in the few years normally after a production is made. And it's very important to say, Spy in their, Spy, who I'm sure you've read their press release, are saying, oh, we're in negotiation with Equity at the moment. Well, I've been talking to Equity today, just in case somebody's going to say we should say that, and it's, oh, that's fine. And in fact, what the president of Equity is saying is that the head of Spy, who used to be also, by the way, the former head of Screen Ireland, a public body, now moved over to the representative of the producers, systematically misled the Budget Scrutiny Committee on the question of royalties. I'm just...
It's very...
Okay.
Individuals.
Misled. Misled. Didn't... I mean, I'm just telling you what they told me. So...
Just, in fairness to the gentleman concerned, he's not here to defend himself, so I just don't think the word...
I mentioned his name, but anyway.
If you have issues with something...
Okay, on the issue that the negotiation, to what was told to the committee was not true. Okay, is that better? Was not true. And
in your opinion, understood.
I'm just simply relaying what I've been told. Now, the point is, this needs to be investigated. That's all we're saying. It's an allegation, but it needs to be investigated, and our committee has gone as far as to write to the European Union to ask it to investigate it, because the EU directive on this is very clear on these key issues. That fixed-term workers legislation, there should not be the use of successive multiple fixed-term contracts. That's the whole point of the directive. And similarly, buyout contracts should be the exception, not the rule. But they are the rule in the Irish film industry. And that means that the benefits, if you like, of and the profits that may derive from their performances and so on accrue to the producer companies, and very importantly, the state gets nothing out of it. The state gets nothing out of it. We've put all the investment in, but we don't get anything from the investment that the state has gone into. In relation to the quality employment and training, and I'll elaborate this when I get a chance to come back, but what we were told in the committee was that the employment relationship does not survive the DAC, in other words, the entity that is set up for the purposes of a single film. Even though we have the same producers setting up DAC and DAC and the same workers working in them over years. But they never accumulate or have vindicated their rights in terms of their service to the industry. Now again, you can see the parallels with RTE at the moment, where we were told there were 500 cases currently of people who have been working again and again for RTE, and now and that these were instances of bogus self-employment, or that's being seriously investigated. So to conclude, we're asking that the government take this report very seriously, these allegations very seriously, because there's a lot of money, and that there would be a forum with all stakeholders involved and all government departments involved to look objectively and independently to scrutinise these issues. You don't have to accept what I'm saying, but to have the forum, which was agreed after a committee that recommended the same in 2014, but which never happened.
Okay, thank you.
And that forum is established as a matter of urgency.
Thank you, Deputy.